China is the most powerful country in the world, but can you imagine that only 4 decades ago the poverty rate in this country was over 90%? Poverty and starvation had made the country miserable. But in the next 30 years, we saw such a huge transformation that the poor, starving country reached the richest country in the world by GDP. In 1978, China's contribution to the global GDP was only 2%. Today, China contributes more than 18% to the global GDP. Their poverty rate is less than 1%, and China is the second largest economy in the world. In many ways, it can be considered as a superpower country. But how was this possible? What exactly have they done that makes them a global superpower in the world? In this video, let's do a detailed case study on the China. China is the world's fourth largest country. Most of the Chinese population actually lives on east coast. This is because the fertile land on which agriculture is possible mostly situated in that area. In the west, there are Himalayan and mountain and deserts. Because of its size, China used to be very successful and powerful country till 19th century. And after that it was affected by colonialism. Although the British could not fully occupy China, but China was humiliated in different ways. This is the reason why the period of 1839 to 1949 is remembered as the century of humiliation by the Chinese. It started in 1839 when the British East India Company began exporting opium in China. Opium is a drug to which many Chinese people got heavily addicted and the entire Chinese society was destroyed. After this, many treaties were forced upon China for which China had to hand over significant portion of lands and its port to British. Then in 1850 there was a terrible civil war in China called the Tapping Rebellion. Fast forward 40 years and you see the first Sino-Japanese War in 1894. China and Japan went to the war over territory. From 1937 to 1945, Chinese people had to endure even more terrible torture by Japanese colonizers. During World War II, around 30 million Chinese were killed. In the midst of all this, a ray of hope was seen when the China and the Allied forces finally won World War II. Japan retired, but right after end of World War II, a civil war broke out of China, a war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party. It started in 1927, but when Japan invaded during World War II, they had stopped fighting temporarily. Their civil war ended in 1949 with the victory of Chinese Communist Party. People of Nationalist Party fled to a nearby Iceland, which is now called Taiwan, and mainland China was ruled by Mao Zedong. This was the point where it can be said that China was formed as a country that we now know. 1st October 1949, People's Republic of China was born. The leader of communists and the hero of the revolution is Mao Zedong. In 1958, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward campaign. Its aim was to bring economic and social transformation to the country. We have first take the land from the landowners and distribute it among the farmers to collectivizing agriculture. Agricultural cooperatives were made so that more farmers could work on the same land, but ultimately the ownership of the land was in the hands of government. On the other hand, telling people to make small-scale stick furnaces in their backyard to produce steel at a local level. But the result was very bad. The small-scale steel furnaces that people had built in their gardens were producing low-quality steel. This led to resources being wasted. Secondly, the farmers did not have any incentive to increase their production because there was no profit sharing and no private ownership. The ownership of the land was ultimately in the hand of government. So whatever crop was being grown by the farmers had to be handed over the government. This led to a huge decline in productivity. Between 1958 to 1961, the grain production fell by 15% in just few years due to the bad weather and some other master-stroke policies of the Mao regime. The situation got so bad that the whole country was starving. The famine was so terrible that around 20 to 40 million people died in this famine in China. It is known as one of the deadliest famine in history. Several such decisions by Mao made China worse. Another example of such decision was the sparrow extermination. Mao's intention was to increase the food production, so it was ordered that all the sparrows and all the birds should be killed because those birds ate some crop grains from the fields. When this campaign was run, the sparrows were killed. A few years later, people realized that the insects and pests were multiplying so rapidly they were causing more damage to the crops. This worsened the food shortage. The situation worsened so terribly that it led to a famine. After such a big failure, Mao was criticized by the Chinese public and also by the Communist Party. But Mao Zedong started another campaign, the Cultural Revolution, in 1966. The real purpose was to give control to the Mao and suppress the opposition. Propaganda and PR machinery were used extensively here. A civilian army is formed by the students, the Red Guards. The Red Guards were loyal soldiers of Mao who had red armbands on their hands, and they used to carry a small red book by Mao. Their job was to target those who were against Mao. Intellectuals, party officials, all those who did not agree to Mao ideology were targeted, publicly humiliated. In the name of this revolution, a fearful environment was created in the whole country. People were encouraged to spy on their neighbors, family members to find the traitors. The traitors were someone who was against the Mao ideology. People had to find them and report about them. Schools and universities were shut down. Students were told to go to the farms and learn the conditions of the farmers, to experience the hardship of the rural life. As time passed, things became out of control. Red Guards started fighting among themselves. Historical sites and cultural artifacts were destroyed. People's lives were turned upside down. This was the time when Tibetans were also tortured. Finally, Mao realized that cultural revolution created a crisis in the country. So, in 1966, to regain control, the Red Guard system was abolished. The estimates vary a lot depending upon the source, but it is said that the hundreds of thousands to 2 million people lost their lives because of the cultural revolution. In total, it is said that up to 50 million people died in China because of Mao policy. In 1976, Mao Zedong passed away due to poor health. Until then, there were no major improvements to China's condition. But it is not that there were only failures and bad things happened during Mao regime. There were also some positive achievements, especially in the terms of women equality and education. A nationwide public education system was launched during Mao's rule. Campaigns were run by the government to end illiteracy, and during Mao leadership, China literacy rate improved a lot. In 1978 compared to 1949, China had 3 times more primary and secondary schools. Mao's opinion about women was women hold up half of the sky. In 1950, a new marriage law was passed according to which arranged marriage and forced marriage were made illegal across the country. Women were given the right of divorce. In many other aspects, women were brought on equal footing. In the next episode, we would see the China's incredible growth and what are the things that made them the superpower. So make sure to subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon.